If someone told you to just be yourself today, ask them one question: which self? Because Jung spent 40 years arguing you don't actually know yet. That advice sounds simple. It assumes there's a finished version of you sitting somewhere inside, waiting to be uncovered like a statue under a sheet. Carl Jung didn't think that statue existed. He thought the self was mostly unconscious, unfinished, and unknowable in full at any single point in a life. He gave this problem a name: individuation. Not a discovery, a process. Individuation, in Jung's own framing, is the integration of the conscious ego with the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. It's less like finding a hidden object and more like assembling one that was never fully built. This matters because most of what circulates online today gets this backwards. Self-help culture treats individuation as a spiritual finish line: wake up, find your true self, arrive at wholeness. That's not what Jung described. He described a lifelong, non-linear integration process that never fully completes, closer to ongoing maintenance than a single revelation. Start with the ego. It feels like the center of who you are, because it's the part doing the noticing. But for Jung, the ego is only the conscious tip of a much larger psychic structure. Most of the material that shapes you sits below conscious awareness entirely. This is the first problem with "just be yourself." The self being referenced isn't fully accessible to conscious inspection in the first place. You can't simply consult it like a file cabinet. Jung's whole model treats large parts of it as unconscious material still working its way toward integration. We've covered one of those unconscious pieces already: the shadow, the disowned, rejected material of the personal unconscious, is a stage already covered in this series. Individuation requires meeting it, not eliminating it. Jung called encountering the shadow the apprentice piece of the whole developmental process, necessary groundwork, not a flaw to be corrected out of existence. We've also covered another piece already: the persona, the social mask calibrated for the outside world, is a stage already covered in this series. Individuation doesn't mean tearing the persona off and discarding it. It means recognizing it as a tool, not a full identity, and no longer confusing the mask for the whole face. This is the key structural insight. Shadow and persona aren't obstacles standing between you and your real self. They're required developmental stages within the integration process itself. Skip either one, and integration doesn't accelerate, it stalls. You end up either performing a rigid social mask with no depth, or drowning in unintegrated shadow material with no structure. So if the shadow is the apprentice piece, what comes next? Jung pointed to the encounter with the anima or animus, the contrasexual figure of the unconscious, as the masterpiece of individuation. This is deeper, more demanding integration work than the shadow stage. It moves further from personal unconscious material into patterns shared across the collective unconscious. Beyond that lies what Jung called the self, and this word does not mean your true self in the popular sense at all. The self, for Jung, is an archetype, the organizing center of the total psyche, conscious and unconscious combined. It's structurally distinct from the ego, which is only ever a fragment of it. Crucially, the self is an archetype of wholeness, not perfection. Wholeness includes the shadow material, the persona, the contradictions, all of it integrated together, not polished away. Jung frequently used mandala imagery to represent this. Patients in deep analysis spontaneously produced circular, symmetrical drawings, which Jung interpreted as unconscious representations of the self organizing itself around a center. The mandala isn't decoration. It's a symbol of integration in progress, fragments arranging around a center point, not a finished, static picture. Here's where the popular interpretation collapses under its own logic. Just be yourself assumes there's a stable, known, fixed self available right now to simply enact. But if the self is largely unconscious, distinct from the ego, and never fully realized, then yourself isn't a fixed answer you can just access on command. This is the video's own argument, not a direct quote from Jung. The advice is logically incoherent on its own terms, because it treats an ongoing unconscious process as if it were already a completed, retrievable fact. Now consider timing. Jung observed that individuation typically intensifies in the second half of life, often beginning in earnest during midlife. The first half of life is largely spent building the ego, career, relationships, social position, adaptation to collective norms. That work is necessary, but it isn't individuation itself. Around midlife, many people find that strategy stops working. Achievements feel hollow, the persona feels suffocating, and unconscious material starts pressing harder for attention. Jung didn't treat this as a malfunction to medicate away. He treated it as a structural signal, the unconscious calling for deeper integration work than ego building alone can provide. This is where the discomfort becomes unavoidable. Meeting shadow material, contrasexual unconscious content, and unfamiliar aspects of the collective unconscious isn't pleasant. But Jung considered this confrontation necessary, not optional. There's no shortcut to integration that skips the material you'd rather not look at. It's tempting, at some point in this process, to feel like you've arrived. A breakthrough moment, a powerful insight, a sense of sudden clarity, it can feel final. This is the danger Jung's model explicitly warns against: mistaking a single integrated moment for a finished state. One mandala doesn't end the process. New unconscious material keeps surfacing across a lifetime. Jung described this as circumambulation, moving around a center in widening, non-linear patterns rather than walking a straight line to an endpoint. You don't arrive at the self. You keep circling closer to it. That's why individuation can never be fully completed. It is, structurally, a direction rather than a destination, an ongoing relationship between ego and self, not a status to unlock. This reframes, just be yourself, completely. The honest version of that advice, by Jung's own logic, would be closer to, keep integrating who you don't yet know. Not as poetic, not as marketable, but structurally accurate to what Jung actually described across decades of clinical work. Individuation isn't a prize waiting at the end of a self-discovery journey. It's the ongoing work of pulling fragments, shadow, persona, unconscious material, toward a center that's never quite finished forming. If this changed how you think about finding yourself, subscribe for the rest of this series on the psychology Jung actually described. No mysticism, no fluff, just the mechanics of the mind.